Welcome to Beyond Recovery, everybody. My name is Matt. I'm joined by the addiction doctor, Dr. Robb Kelly, Ph.D. He is a sought-after recovery expert who believes in treating the causes of addiction, not the symptoms. Robb, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Matt. Great to be here.
Yeah, thanks, and apologies again for getting everything set up here, but we're off to the races now, so appreciate you taking the time.
Of course. Going to be good.
Excellent. Yeah, I really like the just that phrase there, and I want you to we'll start with that before we get into your own personal story. The treating the causes of addiction rather than symptoms. This is something that's been a fairly new thought for me. In my own journey, I think it was Gabor Mate had put out a quote similar to that, and I was like, man, that was a real light bulb moment for me. And it was, looking back, it seems so, kind of obvious. But for me, it really wasn't. I was so fascinated and obsessed with my own addiction that I wasn't doing the work on why I was addicted in the first place. So I'd love to just start there. And if you care to elaborate on that and where the light bulb moment was for you as far as that goes.
Well, most people think, let's just call alcohol, but it's all over addiction. So if you ask an alcoholic why, if you're an alcoholic or not, or if you go out on the streets and ask somebody what is an alcoholic, they'll say the same thing, that it's someone who drinks so much alcohol. Well, what you have to remember from our research, which is vast, probably more than anybody else that's done research on the alcoholic brain, is that it's 1% to do with alcohol and the rest to do with the brain, with neuroscience.
Wow.
So, yeah, the actual symptom or the bottle, it's got hardly anything to do. I've grabbed bottles without taking caps off them or the top of them, and my whole being has changed because it's not about the alcohol. It's about everything else. Trauma is the gateway drug. End of story. And what happens is alcoholics are born and drug addicts are made. And what I mean by that is you can trace alcoholism back through your family. It's generational. If you can trace it back and you have a problem with drinking, there's a good chance you're an alcoholic. Even though it's the only self-diagnosed illness in the world, you probably do if you get out of control with drinking. So it's a predisposition. There's two parts of the brain, three if you include the amygdala. Hypothalamus and the basal ganglia are not reset like other people's. So there's a deformity within the brain. This is what neuroscience tells us. So a hypothalamus in the brain, it tells people it's a fight or flight, to eat food, drink water, run, hide, fight, all that. And it does a great job. The only problem with the alcoholic brain is at a certain point of the drinking, whether it be just started, heavy drinking, we cross over to what's called chronic alcoholism. Once we get there, the hypothalamus tells us to drink alcohol. That's why we cannot stop. So then we go to the basal ganglia, which is also deformed. And that's the repetition, strengthen, confirms part of the brain. What happens with an alcoholic is everything's good. He starts drinking, he gets the house, the wife, the car, then bang, he'll self-sabotage. So it's repairing them two parts of the brain. So when you look at that as a whole, then yeah, what's it really got to do with alcohol apart from it's hereditary? So it's very misunderstood. It's one of the most misunderstood diseases in the world. And it's the only self-diagnosed disease in the world. So I found that all that after becoming homeless, even though I've been to Oxford and I've been to Southampton, I found out all that when I come off the streets because I delve into the science behind alcoholism because nobody told me, you're an alcoholic. My doctor said, you drink so much alcohol, you must be an alcoholic. And nobody could help me. I went to treatment centers. They didn't help me. They couldn't do anything for me. Read a few books, took a few classes, talk about relapse prevention, gave me a big book. And it's just crap for like 10 grand a month back in 1980s. Yeah. It was just ridiculous. So that's what drove me into finding what is this all about? Trauma, predisposition. We can fully recover from alcoholism, and family. It's a family disease.
That's fascinating stuff. That's great. I want to, you touched on it there a little bit into your story. Let's get back into your origin story, if you will. And you have a book out that got released in 2019, Daddy, Please Stop Drinking. And I imagine that's memoirs essentially of your story, but I would love to hear it. What was your story? You touched on it. You were homeless briefly and and so forth. Let's say, yeah. So what was your origin story with alcohol, and how did it lead you into the work you're doing now?
Well, nobody told me it was in the family, so I had no idea. Nobody told me that there was a thing called alcoholism. I had no idea. So at the age of 9, I took my first drink on stage with my auntie and uncle, and that set off the disease. Many, many, many years on, I was drinking more and more and more and more, and then got married. I thought that would cool me down a little bit, drinking every day. Had 2 children. Nope, nothing would stop me. And eventually, horrific things happen. I remember coming downstairs. Alcoholics, if you're any alcoholics listening, you'll get this. I woke up and I needed to drink. I didn't want to drink. I needed to drink. I come down the stairs 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I crept into the kitchen. I searched around the cupboards, and there was a bottle of vodka. Oh my God. I took it out the cabinet. I put it on the side counter. I turned around and I grasped a 50-pound crystal glass because, hey, I'm not an alcoholic. I've seen them guys drinking out the bottle. So that was my first lie. I turned around again to grab the bottle, and my wife had followed me downstairs, and she snatched the bottle of vodka off the side. And this is what she said. She said, hey, listen, I will love you to the day I die, but you're not going to kill our children, and I think you've just had enough. So what I should have done is, oh my God, am I that bad? I do apologize. I'm in blackout most of the time. That's what I should have done. Go back to bed for a few hours. I actually took a kitchen knife out and stabbed her 3 times, and then grabbed the bottle and finished drinking it. When I'd finished, I called a taxi. When the taxi arrived, I called the police and the ambulance. And as soon as I heard the sirens in the background, I fled to Spain. And I won't come back until all charges were dropped. So when I came back, she was all packed up, ready to go with the children, ages 1 and 3. And she left me. And I had a nice house, nice cars, business going well. And then I got my attorney, and I said to him, hey, listen, you get to court tomorrow morning. I want my kids back. And he did. And I paid him a fortune for doing it. And then I remember taking him into a living room, Matt, and sitting him in front of the TV. There's some cartoon on the TV. I walked into the kitchen, and I thought, wouldn't it be great just to have one can of beer to celebrate? 3 days later, when the police kicked the door down, because I'd been in a stupor for 2 days, almost 3 days. I'd been going to the liquor store, leaving the children there. No diapers or food. They had neither. They nearly died. Police bust in, give me papers saying unfit father. And then he took my children off me. And my eldest one, that was 3 or 4 at the time, she's walking down the path, holding mommy's hand the way they do. And she said 3 things. She says, Daddy, please don't go, even though I'd been horrible to them. Then halfway down the path-ish, she says, Daddy, please get better. And as she got to the end of the path and they opened the big gate, she turned around one more time and she says, Daddy, please stop drinking. 2 or 3 months after that, I'd lost her children, I'd lost a wife, I lost the houses, the cars, into my parents. They threw me out after one day, friends or acquaintances. And I was on the streets, homeless for the first time in my life. And that's where it took me.
Wow, that is powerful. That is powerful.
Yeah.
So you're out on the streets now. You've had a tremendous amount of loss. What is going through your head as far as feelings of hopelessness? Like what was it like when you got onto like life on the streets? What was that like, and when did you have that pivot into what you'd said? Okay, time to do some research on this and figure out some more about this, this illness that has been haunting me.
The abandonment was rife because I'd suffered abandonment from a child. No fault of my parents, just babysitters. And, mom and dad were always at work. My mom was a cleaner of houses, and my dad worked for the gas company, digging up roads. So I felt abandoned. Every time I'd call my family, whoever it is, I'd put 10 pence in the phone, and as soon as, hey, they put the phone down. So I remember that being rife. I remember the loneliness being just the silence and deafening around me, even though there were hundreds of people bustling through the place where I used to sit. I couldn't hear anything. I could hear loneliness, and I could hear silence, and I just wanted to die. So I tried to commit suicide on 7 occasions. And on the 2 or 3 occasions, it actually worked. And I actually died on the street. And EMS brought me back to life. And paramedics, they call them in England, brought me back to life on the 2 occasions. I hated them men for that because I just didn't want to live. I was drinking to oblivion every day. I was robbing people, hurting people, fighting to stay alive, literally fist fighting every day. I remember waking up one morning and the guy who was laying next to me was stabbed to death for his sneakers. So I knew I was in a bad area. But I'd grown up on the project, you know, and I'd learned how to fight from an early age. And I did the boxing and the karate and all that stuff. So I could take care of myself. But what was happening is the longer I was on the streets, the less and less I was eating. And this is where the hypothalamus comes in. We can go weeks without water or food. We just need alcohol. So my weight dropped and then I couldn't stick up for myself. So now I was getting beat. I had most of my teeth smashed in, you know, and stuff like that. But it was just a living nightmare. And then about 14 months on the streets, I was walking down the back end of Manchester. There's literally factories and, you know, businesses all closed. It was early hours of Monday morning, say 2 or 3. And I dropped down to my hands and knees and I started crying. And I was crying with like the ache from the stomach, the real cry. I wasn't crying because I'd lost my children, my wife, kids, houses, all that stuff. I was crying because the first time in my life I realized I couldn't stop drinking. And I looked up to the sky and this is all I said. I said, if there is a God up there, I can't do this on my own anymore. 30 seconds later, a guy walked around the corner. He had a small Bible in his hand. He'd missed his last bus home from his Bible study. He'd been walking an hour. He'd never walked from the Bible study ever. So he took a shortcut and he stumbled upon me near the factories. No cars, no people. He asked me, do I want help? And I said, yes. And that is where my journey started.
Wow. So if you weren't spiritual before, I imagine there was some, that's a pretty big sign for you to be open, if nothing else, to the idea of spirituality at that stage, I would imagine.
Oh, it goes more crazy than that.
Yeah,
that was just a 1% because I got back to his house and I ate and I shaved and he gave me new clothes. And he said, you can stay here for as long as you like, Rob, but you've got to come to these 12-step meetings with me. Well, I'd been to them meetings and I hated them, but it was a roof over my head. So I went to this meeting with him. And sure enough, all the guys there were bragging how much they drank and how miserable their life are. And then about halfway around 6 o'clock to where I was sitting, this guy called John, he said, my name's John and I'm a recovered alcoholic. And I thought, recover? What? You can't say that in here. And he talked about the book and he talked about God and he talked about, you know, how can fully recover. And he's just blowing my mind. And so after the meeting, I walked up to him and I said, hey, John, my name's Rob. Would you be my sponsor? And he said, no. He said, but I will be your spiritual advisor for a period of 12 weeks. I thought, well, that's weird, but okay. So he gave me his address. He told me to turn up with a big book and a dictionary. And I said, oh, I went to Oxford. I don't need a dictionary. And he looked me in the eyes and said, please bring a dictionary. So I did, man. Every Wednesday, I would walk an hour to the guy's house and I would spend an hour with him and walk an hour back. So I left around 7, got there for 8, spent till 9, walked home at 9, got home at 10. Did that for 12 weeks. And we studied the book and we studied, you know, what I would call neuroscience back then. And we studied about philosophers and we studied about alcoholism. And, you know, I walked out of that man's house a recovered alcoholic. But that's not what gets weird. What gets weird is he told me that people around me will be kind and life will change from tomorrow. And I said, John, here's the deal. I'm in this guy's basement. I have a blow-up mattress. Nobody knows I'm there. It's impossible for my life. He smiled and said, your life will change from tomorrow. So I went home. I got up the next day, just mulling around the house, and Derek came home early. And I thought, what are you doing home? It's 11 o'clock only. And he said, hey, listen, there's a part-time job going up, Mike, because I'd not told Derek about this because I thought it was just weird and, you know, not true. You've got a part-time job at our place. Do you want it? You can come back now and start sweeping the floors and stuff. I said, yeah, of course I do. So I went. That job later turned into a full-time job. The next week, somebody gave me a broken down mini car, but it allowed me to get to work and back. And life was being good. You know, life was good. And then the 4 weeks, I got my pay packet. It used to be cash in those days. I took £5 out. I went to the garage, the gas station, and I bought John a card and a little teddy bear this big. That's all I could afford. And I walked back to the man's house the way I'd always done for 12 weeks. When I got there, I knocked on the door and there was nobody in. I'm knocking and this lady comes out from the right-hand side and says, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Yeah, can you tell me where John's moved to?" And she says, "John?" I said, "Yeah, the guy that used to live here. I've been coming here." And she says, "You've not been coming here. That's been empty for the 3 months I've been living here." So I let her close the door and I went on to the left-hand door and I knocked on that door. I said, "Can you tell me where John's relocated to?" And he said, "John." "Yeah, John, next door. I've been coming there for 12 weeks. Yeah. He said, "I don't know what you've taken, buddy, or I don't know your past history, but that's a derelict apartment. It's been vacant for 12 months. You can't walk into it. It's dangerous. There's no floors in it."
Wow.
So now I'm bemused. I've got the right place. I know I have. So I went back to the meeting. Just so happens when I went back that evening, the same chairman was on, and I said to him, "Can you tell me where John is? Has he been here since? Or what's his last name?" And he said, "John." And I'm like, "Yes, the guy has to sponsor me. I was over near the coffee machine and we chatted. And he told me to bring a dictionary and blah, blah, blah." And he kind of smirked, which I was pissed at. And then he looked at me and said, "Rob, you're over near the coffee machine speaking to yourself. What's going on?" Never found that man.
Wow.
But that's 90% why I have a 97% success rate in our industry when the average is about 3%.
That's incredible. What an incredible story. So when you reflect back on that, like what is your take on that?
Well, first, I've never mentioned it for the first 15 years or something because I knew people would think I was insane. But when I did, and when I talked to other people, they pointed out that something like it was the 7th and there was something to do with the Bible and lucky number 7. And then there were 12 visits for the 12 disciples. Okay. So they said, "It might be an angel, Rob." And I went, "Yeah, okay, that's what it is." But the more I think about it, what else could it be?
Right.
You know?
Right.
And I wasn't met. I tried to die so many times, Matt. Yeah. You know, I tried jumping off buildings. You know, I just tried so many times to die. It's like I couldn't die. It was kind of a joke on the street. So here comes, you know, try and kill him. You can't stab him. He won't die. Yeah. It's just crazy. But when I came over here, you see, my passport had out a date and I had to wait 4 months. And it was like 4 days before, 5 days before I'm supposed to come to do 2 weeks in America working with a youth ministry on crack cocaine. And I went to the passport office and I said, "Can I expedite it?" And he said, "Yeah, of course you can. It'll be there in 3 weeks." I said, "Oh, no, in 5 or 6 days time, I'm leaving for America. Is it not overnight?" No, it's not overnight. In actual fact, you might as well just get the normal. Don't pay the extra money. It's not going to be there. It'll be 3 or 4 weeks. It'll be with you. Yep. I went back home. I'm just about to call the church that invited me over and paid for everything. Very embarrassed. And he kept putting it off. I was trying to think what to say. You know, making my passport out of date seems so childish. So this morning I got up to knocking at the door. Now this guy, postman, because that's who it was, had to come through the downstairs door. I don't know how he did that. Must have a key. Comes up and he's knocking on my door, and I open the door and he handed me a package and he said, it's made out to you, personal delivery. And I'm like, "Well, the post office don't do personal delivery." He said, "Yeah, we do sometimes." I opened the envelope and there was my passport in 4 days, 5 days.
Wow.
I came over here. Next thing huge that happened was I was throwing up blood after being here for about 4 or 5 weeks, coughing up and then kind of throwing up. You couldn't go to the hospital. I had no insurance. I didn't know what to do, but it got that bad that a friend of mine called the ambulance and they picked me up and they took me to a hospital. And when I finally come round from the painkillers they were giving me because I was in so much pain, they told me they had cancer of the esophagus and that I need to call a parent, and they wanted to speak to my parents in England. And I'm just like, why do you need to speak to them? The success rate is not very good. I've got to tell you now. So I called mom and dad. I was crying. They were crying. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning for them. And the doctors actually came on and told my mom and dad that there's little chance of me coming through this operation. So say your goodbyes now. And next minute they hit me with a pre-med. I went down. Next thing I remember, I woke up in the bed and there's like 5 doctors now and 6 people in suits. And everyone's like talking and mumbling. And I opened my eyes and I saw my wife there and I said, "What's going on?" She said, "Just sign the paper." I said, why? He said, just sign it. So I signed this piece of paper. And what had happened is they took me down for an x-ray, and then they were going to take me straight into surgery. And when they got down to do the x-ray, the cancer had disappeared.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's like, it's crazy things. I mean,
Yeah.
I did my back in, I fell off a ladder and they took me to a hospital a year ago. That's pain, chest pains and everything. So I'm not a drug addict. I'm an alcoholic. Drugs don't bother me. And it's not about the alcohol or drugs anyway. So they gave me morphine followed by, I can't remember the other drug. It'll come to me in a second. But there was a mistake because usually they come in, they know who I am. Hey, Dr. Robb, what do you need? Just give me a milligram of this, milligram of that, dilaudid. And if it doesn't hit, then give me morphine. So they gave me 2 each, which was great. I was out of pain. I was sat there. I was resting with my eyes closed. As the doctor changed shifts, the new nurse came on. She shouted to the doctor, what should I give him? And he heard somehow, what did you give him? So he shouts back, 2 of morphine, 2 of dilaudid. So she loads the syringes and gives me 2 more shots of dilaudid and morphine, and then went on her way. A couple of hours, whatever it was later, a nurse who was supposed to take her lunch at 2 o'clock, couldn't take it till 4. They were that busy. Walked past my private room, looked in, saw me on my face with my gown wide open, showing all my ass. So she came in to close it, and then she closed it. She felt me. She spun me over. She banged the crash cart and she started pumping, and she brought me back to life. It was only her second week there, Matt.
Gosh.
Yeah. Young girl. Crazy.
Absolutely.
So I know
crazy.
I'm blessed. I know that somebody's looking after me, and I know I have a job to do, you know?
Yeah. That was going to be my next. I mean, that's just one thing after another, proving to you that there is a meaning, a reason for you being here. So what did that look like for you after coming out of this? How long did it take you to sort of, okay, this is what I'm going to be going into, working in recovery, doing some recovery coaching and such, and just getting into that line of work? How did that come about? Or was it a while to kind of,
Well, no, I started that in England 16 years ago. I started that in England, just a little, seeing somebody at my psychology license. And, but when I come to America, I spoke for 2 weeks only. But when I left, I don't know what it was, but when I stepped foot on American soil, something told me you're never going to go home again to live. This is your new home. So as soon as I decided that, after the 2 weeks, I stayed there for 4 weeks, and then I filed for my permanent resident. And then I couldn't leave the country till that was done, which took about 6 months. So I started a practice here, and I started a concierge practice. We had I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks in, somebody found me. They're the biggest production company in the addiction world. They wanted to make a 3 CDs, DVDs of me, and I was going to be paid as an actor. And I was like, this doesn't happen to me. We shot it in Austin. They closed the whole hotel down for 3 days. And I probably got $150,000 from that. That was 16 years ago.
Wow.
So with that, we opened a little practice, which turned into a bigger practice. And yeah, I just knew I was always meant to do this, but 7,500 patients on and 30 odd years as a whole. I just know that this is my niche. And I think that's important in life, is to find your niche, find what you are meant to introduce to the world. What's your niche that you're going to be amazing in? And I think many people, especially the people I work with, is we kind of lose our identity and we don't know what our purpose is. And we go through life living on what should be. Well, that's the way marriage is supposed to be. Well, that's just the way the job. My answer is the same. Says who? Who's making these rules up? Step out of your comfort zone and start seeing what God's taught you, or the universe, or 26,000 gods. Just pick one. But something up there is looking after each and every one of us. I believe, it's my opinion. And once you get connection with him, he will show you, or her show you exactly what you need to do in life.
What did it look like for you as far as when you were getting into this line of work, as far as like, is there like an inner voice or a guidance or intuition that you use? What did that feel like for you, as far as like, okay, I know I'm on the right path? And even circling back to like, you've had these like angels, literally these angels come and guide you. Is there something that is in your head, like even back then, where there would be like a voice that would come in and go, say something profound, like it wasn't your inner dialogue, there was something else there? I'm just curious about that. Like, was there anything
Lots of
else?
times, man.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll be on stage and something will come to me and it will be absolutely mind blowing. And I'll come off and they'll be, oh my God. I said, first of all, I have no idea what I said because I always black out when I speak.
Yeah.
Secondly, I know God, but what I got told, what the message I got from God when I came over here was this: guarantee people can recover from whatever they're going through. Because we do trauma victims, we do alcohol, we do drugs, we do business guys, we do footballs. It all depends, but guarantee they can recover. And my first sentence out going back 16 years ago is I can't do that. I can't guarantee somebody's never going to drink again or drug again. I can't do that. And I heard it again, guarantee people can recover. So I started to do that. And like I say, 7,500 patients on. We have a 97% success rate. And we're the only company in the world that offer a money back guarantee. The only company.
And yet you have a 97% success rate too. Like this, that's
yes.
Absolutely incredible. I want to get into just a couple of nuts and bolts of, I like to bring this up on the show, just especially for folks that are just getting into, are sober curious or getting into recovery. Craving management. What are some of it, just advice that you can give for that, or that you've seen been successful with somebody that's trying to navigate this for the first time as far as just craving management?
Let's talk about the real alcoholic, and then we'll talk about the average person. The real alcoholic, there's no such thing as craving. You can't crave for anything that's not already into your system. So you think you crave for alcohol. In actual fact, you have a mental obsession for the alcohol. When we take that drink, now the body gets sick. Now we crave for it more. So it's that mental obsession that starts off. Now, if you're not an alcoholic and you have been drinking, the cravings can start for you. But it's all about the mind. You see, the mind sits inside the brain. It's two entities. So when I make my mind up to do something, what happens is it releases into the brain, and the neural pathways and all the different parts of the brain start to pick that up. So the craving, not so much. The mental obsession, yeah, every time. Well, I made a fool of myself last night, but I'm just going to have one tonight. You go out and you make the fool of yourself again. You know, if you're a heavy drinker or abuse alcohol, and you can stop anytime you want. Try a month sober and see what you achieve in just your work alone. But if you're the alcoholic, you cannot just stop. You know, there's a series of programs you need to go through so that you are recovered, like me, from alcoholism. And most people say all the time, you can't be recovered. Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. No, we recover from the hopeless state of mind, that obsession that I can drink, and the body, because I'm no longer sick because I drink alcohol. And there's no cure for alcoholism. Well, chill out. There's no cure for the common cold or food poisoning. Sure. But there's certain steps we can take to make sure we don't get them again. It's the same with alcohol. But most people, sober curious, they keep going back because they think they enjoy themselves. Alcohol is a depressant. End of story. You know, you can enjoy yourself just as well. And there's a few little tricks you can use. You know, try drinking Friday only for a month. If you drink on Wednesday or Thursday, you need to look at yourself. Remember, only self-diagnosed illness in the world. But just look at yourself. Give yourself a little test like that. Because I'll tell you categorically from my experience that sobriety will give you everything that alcohol promised you.
Ooh, I love that quote. That's amazing. I've also, you're the first person that's ever said it's the first like self-diagnosable, you know.
Yes.
I've never heard it framed like that. So just amazing stuff here. How about for relapses? And I'll just give you my personal take on relapses, essentially. So I always had an issue with when I would have a relapse, I would then beat myself up about it, right? So it's not like I'm admitting I made a mistake. Then I'm there to just, oh, you idiot. Like what? And there's this shame and everything else that was tied into it. So as soon as I was able to take a step back and go, okay, I've made a mistake, and focus on the solution versus beating myself up about it, I had a lot more of a success, and I was a lot more graceful when I would have a relapse. So what could you say folks that are, you know, that have had relapses that are having, you know, just a hard time with it? Like, I guess just advice in general with the relapse.
Yeah, of course,
topic.
Of course. Like if you work a program, a proper program in a proper meeting of a 12-step group, I can't tell you the actual group. If you look, it's right at the beginning of the phone book. And you get into them meetings and you work a solid program as laid down in the first 164, it's impossible to relapse. So what happens is we stop doing certain things and then we relapse. If you're not on any program, then you'll relapse, obviously. But listen, you can't blame yourself for a relapse when your brain is telling you to drink. Okay. So we often say there's no point in you getting mad at me because I'm getting mad enough at myself. I'm punishing enough myself. Let that stuff go.
Right.
It's a new day. 24 hours a day is not a 12-step thing. It just goes way beyond that. It's like, let's enjoy every 24 hours we can. There's certain brain chemicals and certain parts of the brain that reset every 24 hours. That's where it comes from. Enjoy today. What's done yesterday is forgotten about. And you are never, 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 never what you were yesterday. You are what you repetition, confirm, and strengthen do today. So we have to let that go. And then we look at it, go, hey, you know, I don't really want to repeat that. How did I get into that state? Or what did I do? Or why did I relapse when I'm trying to stay sober? And you'll get most of the answers from that group, believe me. If not, call one of my guys over here. We'll walk you through. It's never going to cost you anything, just to give you a little bit of advice. But yeah, we're always hard on ourselves. It's horrible. The remorse, the shame, the guilt, it kills us, man. And most people drink, but again, because of that, because they can't handle. It's like, as long as you're not done any harm to yourself or anybody else, it's no big deal, no? If you sat in your house and you did it, or you come home safely from a party and you did it again, and you're so annoyed, it's not the end of the world. It's really no big deal. In actual fact, you ask anybody with long-term sobriety, and they will tell you that their last relapse was the best thing that ever happened to them. Maybe this is your last relapse.
Right. Ooh, good stuff. Great stuff. I noticed there's a couple of guitars in the background, and I'm always interested to see what folks use. Beyond, so we talked about the program, we've talked about, coaching and such. I imagine that you use a little bit of, creative endeavors as part of your foundation to maintain your recovery sobriety. Is that true? And what kind of places like music and even writing the book and creative side of you has helped you in your personal recovery journey?
Well, writing the book was very therapeutic for me. Everyone says, "Oh, good, you're never going to get rich writing a book, guys. You're never even going to pay the I don't know, the small car payment. You're never going to do it." So it was very therapeutic. But my actual fact, you can't see, but this is my office. It's really big. I have full sets of drums, guitars going down the side, amplifiers, microphone. Yeah,
wow.
I mean, I used to be, well, you probably don't know this, and it might surprise you, that when I was 16, I was a resident bass player for a place called Abbey Road, which is in London, the famous Abbey Road. So I've actually laid bass tracks with Elton John, David Bowie, Freddie Mercury, Queen as a whole. Wow. Yeah, I always wanted to be a pro musician, but what happened is when we were going out to gig as, 15, 16-year-olds, we're probably getting paid, I can't remember, £10 each, let's say. And when I did a session in a recording studio for somebody, they were giving me £50. There was no traveling. I was in and out there in 30 minutes. So it was the answer, So yeah, sure. So that's where, but we do musical therapy. And many people will say, I'm not very musical. So we get them to tap a drum. The reason why we do musical therapy is to change the neural pathways in an instant. So we'll tap a drum and then I say, do 2 of them fast, 2 of them slow. That's a neural pathway change. And then we go try 3. That's a new neural pathway change. Wow. So they understand that everything we do new is increasing the positive neural pathways, and we're coming away from the self-sabotaging neural pathways. Never good enough, never going to be anything. One used to hate me. I was abandoned as a child, all that stuff. And what the old self-sabotaging pathways do is it's like a freeway. When they build a new freeway, it gets moss on it, it gets bricks on it, and eventually you can't travel down that neural pathways that are going to damage you. And there are billions. You can only go through the new ones you've created, and music is one of those. We had a famous drummer from a huge, biggie, one of the biggest bands in the country came to work with us. And he would play drums, and we would play. High musicians to come in, we'd play with him. And then halfway through, so change the beat, and he changed the beat, and then left hand on hi-hat, and he'd swap it across. And oh my, we built some fantastic neural pathways, just like That.
That's
Yeah.
incredible. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. I'm glad I asked. I didn't realize. Well, obviously didn't realize that. That's incredible on your side of things and the way that you guys incorporate music therapy. That's so incredibly cool. And thanks for describing that aspect of it. One last final note I wanted to get into here is like the trauma, and we'll circle back to the very beginning of our conversation here. Trauma being the gateway drug.
Yeah.
Trauma in general. Is it safe to say in your work, trauma always roots back to childhood, like those development, the formative years, like you talked about your own story with abandonment, or I mean, obviously there's trauma that does occur very clearly and distinctly throughout somebody's life, but those core, like when you're talking about like the reason for addictions, is it often or entirely based on like childhood trauma, or is that not necessarily the case? I'm just fascinated by the concept.
The trauma will enhance any addictions that you have in the future. But to back that statement on, we have to realize what trauma is. So this is a bold statement. So if you're listening at home or watching, sit down a minute, you'll need to. Anything less than nurturing as a child is child abuse. Everybody has trauma, but some people who are normal background, there's small T's and big T's. You often hear that with therapists. In my industry, there's no such things as small T's. You see, the alcoholic brain hears things different and we see things different. Let me give you an example. Me and my brother were stood on the kitchen table one day and my mum walked in. And we're not supposed to be on the kitchen table, especially standing on it. So she says to both of us, and this is what my brother hears, get down off that table, you stupid idiot, get down. He jumps off laughing, I freeze. And the reason why I froze is because what I heard, get out off that table. Because I'd heard mom and dad scream at each other enough times that I'd taken that on. So I hear that differently. How many times have I told you, Rob, you can't go to college like your brother. You're not clever enough. That's just ruined my life. And when that thought pattern, because everything we see, hear, feel, touch is all stored in the subconscious brain. And when that will come to fruition into the prefrontal cortex, which the prefrontal cortex, man, it has one job. And that's to come up with a solution as fast as possible to the problem that we have, which it does. The only problem being, it doesn't have to be the right answer. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah. So we think, oh, drinking, oh, whatever. Yeah. It's like the sabotage. So it'll recall that memory, and that memory will play out in relationships, just before you go for a job, just before you're going to do something that'll better your life, that you're a piece of crap comes in, or you're not worth it. How many times have I told you you're not as good as your brother? That's where most families really start getting mixed up, because we won't take the patient unless we take the mom and dad or the wife or husband. We just won't do it, because no one's fault, by the way, but this is what we say, because it's generation. It's learned behavior from your parents and your parents and it's all the same going back generations. Is the idea of the nursery rhyme at school, sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me, is totally a full-blown lie. Words can kill us. Fancied or real, they can kill us. So how many times, you're ugly, oh, you bitch, you're ugly, whatever it is, the girl goes to commit suicide and people go, what went wrong in our society? It's like, you've got to be careful what you say to each other. So I can either build somebody up or I can tear them down. The time frame's the same, just different language. That's all coming out of my mouth. So we really have to go back and look at what happened in our childhood that affected, because the correlation between the events, and there are thousands, and what we do today, you go, I don't get, why am I acting this way? Because years and years ago, when you was a baby or a young person, mom and dad said this to you. And that's why you're doing that. Why do I keep attracting a guy that is an alcoholic, ends up beating me? What was your parents like? Well, my dad,
yeah, okay.
It's like when I was going through my therapy, the therapist said to me, tell me about your school. I said, well, first of all, I used to get up, put my shoes and socks on and get the cardboard. And she went, whoa, what do you mean the cardboard? I said, well, Mum, because we had holes in our socks and shoes because we couldn't afford new ones. She used to cut round a shoe. And then she placed the cardboard between my socks and the shoe. And I'd walk to school in the snow. But by the time I got there, my feet were freezing. And it's just what we had. So she then said, well, did your mum and dad go to the bar at all? I know they were poor. Oh, this is my rate. Oh, yeah, they went every Friday and Saturday, Sunday night. They went and just did it. It was religious. And then there was a pause. And then she said to me, did your mom and dad go to the pub with holes in their socks and shoes? And that's why I have 74 pair of shoes today.
Wow. Yeah.
Now,
Jeez.
thinking why I keep buying shoes,
Yeah.
and I only buy it from when they go on a bargain or something, I'll go to the base of, I buy them off there. I can't pay that stupid price, even though I'm, wealthy. But the reason why I did that, I never knew until I sat down with a therapist. And because I didn't have proper shoes and socks, I'm compensating for it now.
Wow.
Now, you would never put them two together.
Right.
But that's what trauma is. It's like, let's pick everything out and find out what was your problem. Where was the scene of the crime for you?
Yeah. Scene of the crime.
And it's always there, Matt. It's always there.
That's incredible. I've never heard somebody articulate trauma like that. It's and everything that you've said today, Dr. Robb, it's just amazing stuff. So I can't thank you enough for coming on. And where can somebody reach out to you or find you if they're interested in what you're saying? It's really landing and resonating with them and they want to reach out. Where can they find you?
Dr. Robb Kelly in any search engine, or I spell my name with 2 B's. So it's ROBB, KELLY.com. You can buy the book there. And the only reason why I mention it is it's $9. We don't do all the profits go to charity. That means that everyone's taken every single dime of that money for that book. We don't see it goes straight into a separate account that one of our assistants uses. So what happens is at the end of the year, there might be $900 for people pay books. We add around $50,000 to $100,000 to that account. And that goes out to lots of people who are suffering from addiction, loneliness, abandonment. We'll pay for you to get your kids back for a weekend. We'll pay for your suit if you want to go for a new job interview. We use all this money for that. And I always say, if you buy it and you think it's not very good, let me know, email me. I'll send you a refund as long as you pass it free of charge to somebody else. Everything is on that. In actual fact, I don't know when this goes out, but in a couple of weeks, I'm doing a free webinar in August, a free webinar on trauma and addiction. So jump on, click the link, get on there, register. There's only 50 places left, I believe, but it's free. You'll learn so much more than you've ever learned in universities, because this is our tried and tested research that we've been doing for so many years.
And so, Dr. Robb, do you have the exact date there? So we can talk about when this episode can come out, but I would love to be able to throw that in the show notes as well.
I will. It's August the 11th.
August 11th. So I believe that's a Thursday, correct?
Correct. I think so. Yeah.
Thursday the 11th. And is that, do you happen to have the time? Totally putting you on the spot here.
6 p.m. Central Time.
Beautiful. 6 p.m. Central. Okay.
It is on a Thursday. Yeah. 6 p.m. Central Time, but you've got to register now. Click on, fill out your name in and all that. And then I'll see you there. It'll be a fantastic hour or a couple of hours. We'll just go as long as everyone gets bored, I guess.
But yeah. And it's certainly they won't be getting bored off this stuff. This is riveting stuff. And the link for the webinar, would that just be available on robbkelly.com?
Yeah, it's all there. There's a
Brilliant.
couple of things I'm doing, but one of them's free. Those ones is free, but it's for a school and university only. I've written pieces for Harvard and all that stuff. So very educational stuff, free of charge. Click on there and you'll see everything else that I'm doing will be on that site. Everything that we do is on the site. That's
wonderful. Dr. Robb, thank you so much for coming on today. This was just incredible information, and what a story you have as well. So thank you so much for being so, upfront and honest about your story, because it is truly unbelievable. But in the same token, I believe you. Like, it's what an incredible story it is. So thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you, man. Absolute pleasure. One thing I'd like to do before I go is, if you're sat at home, guys, and you're listening to this, and you're thinking you're not much, and you don't think you amount to anything, and you don't think you can achieve anything because your parents have been telling you that, I apologize to you. Somebody's put that there. We're born with $1 million minds. Why do we still hang around 10-cent minds? I will never know. So here's the deal. My feet are always in the trenches. They'll never come out of the trenches. 214-600-0210 is my personal private cell phone. I will give you a pep talk in 10 minutes that will change your life. And if I don't, I will send you $100 for your time for calling me. I would rather spend 10 minutes on the phone changing your life than hear of your funeral. So there's the offer. No, you don't need any money.
Brilliant. Dr. Robb, that is amazing. That's the mic drop moment. We'll end at that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.